So we're joined now by Mr. N. Ramachandran. He is in Trivandrum. He's the former DGP of Assam and Meghalaya, and more importantly, the founder president of the Indian Police Foundation. And this is a think tank that focuses on police reforms. And this is pretty much the talk of today, considering that the custodial deaths in Satankulam in Thoothukudi district, Tamil Nadu, have hit the headlines and made a splash in a big way. So um, Mr. Ramchandran, thank you very much for talking to us and sharing your knowledge.
No.
Sir, there are a number of commissions, the police commissions that have already been set up. The states have had police commissions, and apart from the National Police Commission as well. So, in your view, have reforms actually happened, or there appear to be a lot of reforms that are still pending, and this is probably one of the reasons why such custodial deaths are taking place today.
See, the National Police Commission was the most important milestone in the journey towards police reform. And the National Police Commission set up in the 1970s. You know, they submitted their report in 8 volumes, 8 parts, and they were submitted between 1979 and 1982. And substantial part of the discussions of the police commission were on matters relating to abuse of arrest and abuse of various kinds of police powers. It included political interference, abuse and bias, etc., separation of investigation wings and prosecution. So, series of reforms for protection in the case of arrest, issue of things like a 3rd degree, how to avoid 3rd degree, and what is to be done in the case of public complaints against arrest. All these things are very, in a very detailed manner, have been dealt with by the National Police Commission. And those reports are very relevant even today. But the fact remains that most of these reforms have not been effected. And these reports have been lying around without any serious,
why have they not been effective?
Serious attempts by governments in power. My own feeling is that, you know, many of the political parties that have ruled this country, they have vested interests. It is a well-known secret that political parties, you know, have been manipulating the police for their own ends. So no political party would like to set the police free, to provide what may be called operational freedom. Now, when we are still on the subject of police reform, I must also tell you that in the year 2006, the Supreme Court of India laid down the landmark judgments on police reform. In the year 2006, in what is called the very famous Prakash Singh case. In that,
can you go over the main points, sir?
So in that 2006 case also, the Supreme Court specifically mentioned that the police should have operational autonomy, and the political leadership. You know, we are a democracy, and there is a very genuine role of the political leadership. The political leadership should exercise oversight over the police, but at the same time, that oversight should not be in the nature of day-to-day interferences. Who should be arrested, who should not be arrested. Those kind of things should be left to the police. The police has to exercise their powers strictly as per the rule of law. They cannot capriciously, perform their duties. They have to strictly go by the rule of law, and the political leadership should not interfere in day-to-day matters or affairs of the police. So that was the sum total of the 6 directives. And in that 6 directives, one very major directive was that there should be what is called police complaint authority. Police complaint authority set up at the state level and at the district level, so that if citizens have complaints against the police, these complaints can be filed with the police complaint authority. And this police complaints authority is to be headed by a judge. At the state level, in some of the states which have set it up, they have a retired judge of the High Court who heads the state level police complaints authority, and or a district judge at the district level. So what has happened is that most of the states, it's only about 15 or 16 states that have actually set up the police complaint authority. Other states have not even bothered to set up this police complaints authority. And some of the states where they have set up, only in a few cases they really have the teeth. In other cases, they can only make recommendations and no action can be taken against the police officer unless the political leadership wants it. So the political leadership has an axe to grind. And I must also confess that even some elements in the police and in the bureaucracy also have an axe to grind in continuing with the existing system. So there has been a lot of vested interest in making sure that the present system continues. So, one of the major reasons why this authority is set up is that very often the police, when they indulge in any of these kind of, whether the complaint is in the shape of corruption or in the shape of police violence in custody, etc. In most of these cases, or in many of these cases, there are senior police officers who try to whitewash the thing. They try to protect their subordinates even when they are actually guilty. So that is why, to give this, to obviate any kind of unwanted protectionism, that is one of the reasons why this police complaint authority is set up, and which is to be headed by a retired judge. So there will be always a police officer as a member of the police complaints authority who gives technical advice, etc. And these police officers, retired police officers who are members of this, are generally well chosen to make sure that they are independent and they have a clean reputation. So, in states where PCA, that is Police Complaint Authority, has been set up, in many states they are doing a good job. But in some states, even if they do a good job, their recommendations can only have they can only make a recommendatory kind of report. And
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding, this is coming out of the current custodial debt situation that is, going on right now. Now, there are 3 policemen involved. One is an inspector, and there are 2 sub-inspectors. And all 3 of them seem to have had, at least 2 of them have had FIRs already lodged against them for various kinds of crime. One is for dowry harassment. One is for, I think there was one on a similar kind of battery kind of charge where he has beaten up a traffic violator, somebody who violated a traffic rule. And the third SP the third SI has been, consistently displaying aggression and violence and brutality. Now, how does the system miss this? How does this fall through the cracks?
I really don't have specific information about the Satankulam case. My own information is only based on press reports. So I don't have access to the real story. So I will not be able to comment on this specific case. But generally speaking, it is the duty of the senior supervisory officers to make sure that officers chosen to man the police station are persons of reasonably good integrity and who don't have these kind of proclivities to indulge in, violence or insensitive behavior against the citizens. So it is the job of the superior officers to make sure that persons of such questionable integrity or questionable past are kept under close watch, even if I mean, it is possible that one person, there may be an allegation against him, but if there is, even if it is only in the shape of an allegation, it will be useful or it will be necessary to keep a watch on his activities to make sure that he does not exceed his limits. So it is again ultimately the responsibility of senior officers to make sure that these kind of situations don't go out of hands.
My next question to you, Mr. Ramchandran, is about how much is all of this going to cost? Do we have the money to, implement all of these police reforms?
So police reform, when you come to police reform, my own personal opinion is that reforms are largely the responsibility of, again, senior police officers. You cannot put the blame on politicians for everything. Like behaving well with the citizens, it doesn't cost any money. No politician, no home minister, no chief minister is going to interfere and ask you, don't behave well with the people or do misbehave with such and such. No man is going to tell you like that. So blaming the politician for everything doesn't mean anything. It is the responsibility of the senior police officers to initiate police reforms. Nobody is going to come and reform your police. You have to reform the police yourself. So internal reforms consist of 90% of police reforms. So even if you go by the recommendations of the police commission, you will find that 90% of those recommendations are doable by the police leadership within the limits of their powers. You don't need to take political, political clearance in doing many of these things. But there are certain areas where politicians do interfere. Like you must have been reading in newspapers about, these are isolated cases. Again, let me tell you that vast majority of policemen do their job honestly. But the number of bad apples may be very few, but these cases get highlighted. Because of that, the people, the citizens think that every policeman is corrupt or every policeman is mismanaging things. It is not like that. Policemen, there are thousands or several, or I can say a substantial part of the police force is doing their job silently and honestly. And at the same time, so what happens is the people who are indulging in, malpractices, it is the job of the senior police officers to correct them. And for that, you don't need political clearance. But at the same time, let me tell you, there are reasons where sometimes a certain investigation, for example, is colored by political interference. There again, it is the fault of the police officer. If any politician interferes and says you arrest so-and-so or don't arrest so-and-so, the police officer should show the courage, the spine to stand up and tell him, sorry, sir, this I am not going to listen to you. I will follow the law of the land. That courage of conviction and that level of integrity, moral integrity on the part of the police alone can reform the police. As long as we have police officers who are spineless, any amount of reform on paper is not going to help. So this is my personal feeling is that there are, of course, certain areas where police reforms have to be politically engineered. But 90% of the reforms are within the hands of the police, which can be easily For example, improving the quality of training, sensitization of people, etc., etc. These are all within the hands of the police leadership. Of course, there is another problem, that is the problem of finances. That is, police is one of the least or the lowest priorities in many states in the country. So in many states, I'm personally aware that the money that is allocated through the budget, most of that money goes only for paying salaries. You don't have any money for modernizing the police, buying new equipment, new vehicles, new weapons, etc. So there is a major problem about financial issues. But at the same time, large sections of police reform do not need any money. You can do with your existing resources, and the existing officers can effect those reforms without any interference from the politicians.
So basically, all you're saying is that all it takes is will on the part of the police force to actually implement and bring about some positive change. The point is very fair and well taken. So my last question to you, can you give our audience, I mean, most of our audience are not, policemen, or they have no idea about how the police works, the police system works. Can you give us 5 key points that need to be implemented immediately in order to prevent such custodial deaths in the future?
So it is, number one is that senior police officers have to exert much more control and supervision of the functioning of the police station. Now, that is a supervisory function, and that is one very effective way of preventing custodial, any kind of not only death, but even matters like custodial violence and, and even unnecessary arrests or unnecessary vexatious prosecution and all kinds of mismanagement of or abuse of powers by the police. So this is number one. And number two is that the police is very hugely understaffed. But at the same time, many parts of the country, in many state police, there are large numbers of vacancies. These vacancies need to be filled urgently by recruitment. And during this recruitment, it has to be done absolutely cleanly. And there should be no instance of corruption in recruitment. Because if a man has to pay money to become a policeman, then he has to recover that money. But many states have again done so well. Even Tamil Nadu itself has done so well in making sure that police recruitment is done in a very transparent manner.
True. That's true to a large extent.
The transparent recruitment process has happened in Tamil Nadu also. They are doing it very well. But that recruitment has to be done urgently where there is vacancies, large numbers of vacancies. These have to be filled very urgently and they have to be done like the recruitment itself needs a certain level of reform in choosing the choice of the right kind of candidates, because now we are still following the very ancient systems of recruitment. We need to revisit that. And once we have recruited, training is the next most important thing. And training of police personnel will need to be revisited absolutely and completely overhauled, because our training is based on the traditional militaristic kind of training. Doing in a constable's training or even in an IPS officer's training, half of the day is spent in learning marching and drills, marching, this, that, etc. So there has to be a revisiting of the police curriculum itself, and to make sure that police training gets more attention into other soft skills part of training, and also use of technology. Today I was participating in a training program in a place where constables are being trained in a certain state, and I found I was so surprised, agreeably surprised, that more than half of the constables were engineering graduates. They are very well, very well qualified, and they are very technically savvy people. They can be molded, and their technology knowledge can be molded in such a way that we can make policing much more transparent. And technology is the biggest hope for bringing transparency as well as accountability into policing. So technology is a very big hope. And, again, let me tell you that there are tens of thousands of police officers and men in this country making use of technology and doing a great job, and bringing about, you were asking about reform. A lot of reforms, silent reforms, are actually happening on the ground. And these one or two cases which are happening have completely shattered some of our image. But at the same time, there is substantial levels of, reform happening. But I am a little impatient. I am not happy with the incremental reforms that are taking place. We need to go a little faster.
So you've given us 3 points, Mr. Ramchandran. The third point was training. What are the last 2 points you'd suggest?
Okay, so I said about the recruitment and training. Of course, first one is the supervision on the ground and recruitment training. And also, when we come to investigation, the traditional means of investigation, like questioning the man, beating him up and trying to extract a confession from him, these are the 19th century techniques. Today we are in 21st century. We have to adopt scientific methods of forensic investigations. And there is so much of technology that has evolved over the last few decades. And it provides great hope for bringing in technology and forensic sciences into investigation. If we can adopt those forensic sciences techniques, which is which holds great hope for the police to modernize the police, because reform also means modernization. Now, the last point I want to make is about the famous, the statement made by the Prime Minister of India that the Indian police should be made what is called, smart police. I don't know if you have gone into the details of the smart policing vision that the Prime Minister mentioned in the year 2014, when he had first taken over as the Prime Minister of this country. If you analyze what the Prime Minister said, it is absolutely about soft skills and training and various other things. But so it has not been understood by many in the police and in the bureaucracy. And unless it is understood and implemented, smart policing could have been a great opportunity. Now, the Indian police has missed the several opportunities for reform. The biggest opportunity was in 2006, when the Indian Supreme Court of India directed or issued directives that these 6 reforms should be immediately effected to kickstart police reform. That is what the court said, kickstart police reforms. And when I read about it the next day in the newspapers, I was so happy that police reform is finally going to happen, because the Supreme Court has said it and Supreme Court has ordered it. But still, we have been able to completely sabotage the Supreme Court orders, and we have missed that opportunity. The other opportunity, I thought, was the 2014 Prime Minister's vision, which was unveiled in 2014 about what is called smart policing. Even that bus we have missed. But I don't know. My own feeling is that it is up to the people of India, when they are electing their leaders, to make sure whether you are electing a constitution, an MLA or a member of parliament, you have to tell them that this is one of our requirements. You know, the elected leaders of this country will have to be pressurized to make sure that police reform takes place, because police reform is something which every citizen, which is important for every citizen. Otherwise, these kind of accidents will continue to happen.
Great. That was an absolutely brilliant summation of what has happened, in fact, since emergency. So thank you for taking us through the entire journey of police reforms, or rather the lack of police reforms. And let's hope that Satangulam remains the last custodial death in the history of India. We'll stay positive and hope for the best. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramchandran, for joining us on the lead. And we hope to hear from you once again in the near future. Thank you very much for your time.